Be another day before you can do that.
We have a chance of getting the rover off the ramp today and of getting a soil measurement, which will be the first really good measurement on Mars ever, really, given the kind of resolution we have compared to Viking. And then maybe the next day we would go for the rock.
So on Sunday, if things proceed, and you are confident that they're going to solve this communications problem.
Oh, these engineers are aces. They are sharp. This is trivial. They are going to fix this. We're going to be on our way in no time. Everything has gone just perfectly. We've done, I think I told you, about a dozen operational readiness tests in the laboratory here, and we have never had everything work as perfectly as it did yesterday. A stunning success.
Mathew, thank you very much for joining us again.
Welcome.
He has a very, very busy schedule behind him that he finished up and ahead of him, and he's always been very gracious to join us here. And of course, they had always said that if they just got on Mars and if they got one picture back, this would be successful, this mission, and it has far, far exceeded that. Lyndon?
Gee, do you think Mathew sounds just a little bit excited? John, thanks very much.
Just a little bit.
CNN's John Zarella in Pasadena, California. Thank you. And stay with CNN. Message from the Red Planet inspires cheers and a big sigh of relief on Earth as NASA works feverishly to restore contact on Mars with the Sojourner rover and salvage its outer space journey. At CNN Center in Atlanta, I'm Lyndon Souls. Welcome to Prime News. We are standing by for a scheduled NASA briefing on the Mars mission. We'll bring that to you live as soon as it begins. Anxiety has given way to exhilaration for the scientists now that they've remedied a potentially crippling communication problem with the Mars Pathfinder and its robot rover. CNN's John Zarella has been following the story. He joins us now live from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. Hi, John.
Good evening, Lyndon. We understand that the briefing has already begun, so we're going to take you right inside and let you hear what the scientists have to say.
Minutes a day. Today, this afternoon, over at the Planet Fest at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, I had the pleasure, extreme honor, of participating with Dan Golden and Carl's wife, Annie Druyan, naming the Mars Pathfinder lander the Sagan Memorial Station. Very fitting. Not only did Sagan inspire the general public, he spent a lot of time here at JPL. He was a participating scientist on many of the missions, and he inspired all of us rocket scientists here at JPL as well. Once I was on an agenda. There was this agenda, and it was all printed out. Tony Speer is on the agenda making a presentation, and Carl Sagan was making a presentation. I was so excited about that, I almost forgot what I was going to say. Over the last couple days, we're verging on near miracles, okay? My wonderful team, led by Cookie here, Richard Cook, and I'm wondering if Carl Sagan is not looking down on us, smiling, having fun. Maybe he had a hand in a couple of these events that have happened over the last day and a half. So that's all I have to say. I'm very proud that now Mars Pathfinder lander is the Sagan Memorial Station.
Okay, well, I think our excitement continues today. For those of you who've been listening in on the VoiceNet, you can tell that this morning has been an interesting, or this afternoon has been an interesting afternoon already. We've just completed a transmit downlink session on the spacecraft in which we got a number of interesting results, led by the fact that we're now receiving communications from the rover. Matt will discuss that in a minute here. But in addition, we have discovered that during the night last night, actually right at the end of the activities on Sol 1, so at about 10:30 last night here in Pasadena, the spacecraft flight computer reset. And what happens when a reset occurs is the spacecraft essentially terminates all of the sequences which it's running and goes into a kind of a, not really a safe mode, but essentially sort of just turns on some of the receiver and the flight computer and just basically sits there and waits for the Earth to come along and tell it what to do. Normally, we would not have known that activity took place because we would have expected a communications from the spacecraft in the morning and not received it. But as it turns out, in order to troubleshoot the rover problems, we scheduled a special downlink this morning, which was performed nominally, and so we got the data back, which said that this reset had occurred. The spacecraft is fine. The lander's fine. It essentially operated all night just as it was supposed to, and we got the data back telling us that that all of the subsystems were performing fine. But we're a little perplexed as to what happened, and so we're right now, hopefully, we are transmitting commands to the spacecraft to tell it to start a new downlink session in which we're going to send some more diagnostic data down, and then we should be able to figure out what happened. But essentially, it did not adversely impact us really in any way, but we do want to understand what happened. But overall, because of the fact that we also this morning received additional images of the area behind where the rover is sitting, we feel like we're actually, once we get this next set of data down, that we're really able to then go on with the remainder of the day's activities, picking up essentially where we left off yesterday with the ramp deploy and eventual rover egress. So I think that's it. I'll let Matt talk about what they've learned from the rover side.
Richard. As I said a little earlier, we feel like somebody just invited us back to the party. We've got, as most of you are aware, we had an issue last night with the rover communications and the lander where we had a degradation of our communications link. The rover team got together and valiantly worked through the night. They came up with a number of possible scenarios, and they developed a list of potential fixes for those scenarios. And we implemented a number of those this morning, actually just before the downlink. And when the downlink started, as you just heard Richard mention, we did in fact receive good rover to lander communications. And all the indications are that the rover was, in fact, doing exactly what it should have done, which was to perform its run-out sequence from yesterday and wait for new commands. It did receive a new sequence from us this morning, which essentially told it to continue to communicate with the lander and to wait for further instructions. And so that's where we're at with the rover. The team, I can tell you, is extremely pleased. There are a few touchdown dances done, I think, when we get that information. And we're ready to move forward here and get the rover stood up and egress down the ramp.
Okay, we'll go to Q&A momentarily. First, I just wanted to mention that we're going to be discussing with the project plans for our 9 p.m. press briefing tonight. It's possible that we may not really have significant new data to release, and so that briefing may be canceled. But please check with the newsroom to see what the status on that is. And the team's under a very tight deadline, so we'll try to move very quickly with our questions. Let's see, can we get one to John Wilford?
John Wilford, New York Times. If there's not a briefing at 9 o'clock, what happens if the rover goes out? Will we get some feed on that at that time? Or could you go over, has there been any change in the timing for stand-up, ramp, egress, and all those things?
The plan is still to, presuming that we get information back in this next downlink, which looks good, and tells us what happened, and I think we will, we should be able to move forward with ramp deployment in the next hour or so after that, hour to 2 hours. And then rover egress could occur 2 to 3 hours after that. So we're
3 hours after what?
After the ramp deploy.
That would be what? Give me just round figures. I want to know if
6:30, 7 o'clock.
What?
About 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock is ramp, and 3 hours later?
2 to 3 hours later after that would be the rover.
And just to answer your question about how we would communicate that to you, we will in any case have commentated mission coverage on the video monitors running until 12 midnight Pacific time. So you'll be able to check the status that way.
I don't need to add that, you know, I'm sure you guys have, you've already convinced you over the last day and a half that things are somewhat uncertain and that things will happen at the rate at which they're going to happen. So that's just my guess, but at this point, we'll have to see how things go.
Andrew?
Andy Chaikin, Popular Science. I just want to make sure I understand what you think happened to clear up the problem with the modem, the communications. There were two things that you mentioned. One was that the lander's computer reset itself, and was that what cleared it up? And the other thing you mentioned was that the rover received commands that you sent last night, and what role did that have in clearing it up?
Okay, let me